Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com. Welcome to the reprehensibles, to the unauthorized, to the dread ilk, to the VFM, and the bears. Tonight, we're going to talk about not all government is socialism. And the reason that this is important is not because I am trying to defend socialism in any way, shape, or form. It's because words mean things. And even as we don't want to indulge in wizardry, we also don't want to be inaccurate or speak falsely about the topics that we're addressing. I'm going to see if I can adjust this a little bit. There we go. We seem to get a little better light for some reason when I'm not excessively zoomed in. So, why do people get so bent out of shape? Why do people assign, label things as socialism that quite clearly aren't? And the truth is that capitalism versus socialism is a false dichotomy, and that's the real reason for it. People want to be on the side of freedom. They want to be on the side of economic growth. They want to be on the side of people becoming wealthy. And it's very, very easy to get trapped into this binary thinking because most people are binary thinkers. That's the disappointing reality. Most people are binary thinkers. They can only think in terms of either or. And so when you see people criticizing the obvious flaws of the neoliberal world order, they tend to get confused. But it's important to remember that socialism is a relatively recent conceptual development. It's only been around since the 19th century. Also, Karl Marx did not invent socialism. There are a number of socialisms. If you go back to the guy who first coined the term, Saint-Simon, his concept of socialism was different than Karl Marx's. And there's a tremendous amount of diversity of thought within Marxianism. So you've got the doctrinaire Marxists, then you've got the Marxist-Leninists, because Lenin significantly modified Marxism, and then you've got all these other post-Marxist socialisms that we refer to as Marxian. So there's a difference between Marxism, Marxist-Leninism, and Marxianism. And somebody just said, see, here's where I get a little bit impatient with people. Somebody just said, true socialism has never been tried, LOL. Okay, you're going to have to elevate your understanding because we're operating on a much higher level than that. Okay? Socialism has been tried many times. And socialism is a failure. I am not advocating socialism. I am a more determined opponent of socialism than most of the people that you think are big-time capitalists. But the important thing to understand is that socialism is not the only alternative to capitalism. It's not the only alternative to this bizarre mixed economic system that we currently have, which is not capitalism. That's important to understand. We don't live in a capitalist system. Most of the quote-unquote investing that you think about as investing has nothing to do with investing in production, in investing in economic development. When you go to the Indian casino, you are not investing money. When you buy a stock, you are not investing money. You're playing a gambling game, and the house is stacked against you. I'm aware that the whole socialism is a meme thing, but again, you can't type sarcasm. Doesn't work. There's already 417 people here. It's either I ignore everything you guys type, or you learn to stop trying to be sarcastic and that sort of thing. So when you look at and the reason that I'm talking about this is because I posted a link to an interview with a guy by the name of Michael Hudson, and I haven't read the book yet, so I can't speak for either the author, or I can't speak to the author or the book. But what I can say is, and the book is called "And Forgive Them Their Debts." What's the full name of it? Let me find this here. The full name of the book is "And Forgive Them Their Debts, Lending, Foreclosure, and Redemption from Bronze Age Finance to the Jubilee Year." It's by Michael Hudson. And it's very interesting because there's not a lot written about economic history. I'm a big fan of economic history. I've read Schumpeter's History of Economic Thought twice. I've read Rothbard's 2-volume economic history. There's not very much out there. One day, actually, that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to write a serious economic history at some point in time. But the thing is regardless of what Hudson is advocating, if his history is good, then his history is good. And so it's important to try to understand these things. And one of the things that he is talking about in this book and talks about extensively in the interview, and was one of the reasons that I'm so interested in reading it, is that he deals directly with the subject of usury. And he's referring to, he's not a Christian. He clearly doesn't believe that, that Jesus Christ is real, but he does understand the significance of the Lord's Prayer when Jesus talks about forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And the thing is, people tend to think of that only in terms of sin. But that is probably not correct. And especially if you think about it in the context that Jesus Christ warned that the love of money is the root of all evil, then, it's clear that he's actually talking about debts, actual debts. And it was really remarkable reading the history, Murray Rothbard's history of economics, because it was very clear that the entire history of medieval economics and leading up into the Renaissance and the modern era, it was all about a constant battle to convince the church to permit usury, a constant battle to get the church to permit the expansion of credit. And what we've seen now is the end game of that. We're seeing credit piled up, stacked on top of each other, so that there are, something like $13 in claims for every single single dollar of actual goods, or for every single dollar, there's actually something like $13 in claims to that dollar. And so this is a system that cannot last indefinitely. And that's one of the things that Hudson addresses, is the way in which there used to be a system of regular debt jubilees. So every 50 years or so, it's in the Bible, but it's also in a number of historical economic systems, where if you were in debt, your debts were forgiven. Everything got canceled out, got started over, and yeah, Frank Meadows points out there's even the parable in the Bible about the master who forgives the debt, and then the person he forgives doesn't, and then the master takes it out on him. That's not necessarily just related to sin, forgiveness, and salvation. You often get taught in Sunday school that what that means is that you've been forgiven by God, so you should therefore forgive people who have somehow sinned against you or done something wrong to you. But it's not just about that. It is actually about financial debts as well. And so when you look at well, let me back up here for a second. Courtney says debt is definitely evil, but you do it to yourselves. That's not true, because all of us are affected by debt. Because what debt does is expand the money supply, because debt is money. Let me give you an example. College used to be much less expensive. Going to university for 4 years used to be much less expensive. And it isn't just inflation. What happened was they came up with the college loan program. And so suddenly people who didn't have the money to go to college had more money available to them. And so because they had more money, universities began jacking up their prices. And so people would borrow more and more and more money in order to purchase the same piece of paper that 10 years before, 20 years before, had cost significantly less. And that's why going to college and getting a college degree is no longer worth it anymore for the vast majority of people, because they're overpaying for it. And the reason they're overpaying for it is because students are now allowed to go very, very heavily into debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt. They can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars they don't have in order to get a college degree. And so that affects you in the same way that, that's why houses are so expensive. It's partly because of immigration, there's more people, but it's also partly because the ability to borrow money inexpensively to buy a home is automatically going to drive the price up. This is basic economics 101, supply and demand. If you increase the demand and supply remains constant, what happens? The price goes up. And so what credit does is it slides everything way up the demand side. It increases demand significantly. And so, let's see here. Stacy had a question. I missed it. Anyhow, yeah, I mean, debt is intrinsically inflationary. I see. Why aren't auto-generated captions available for Vox's videos? I had them turned on. I don't know why they're off, but yeah, they should be on. Normally, I like to have them on. Anthony Garcia asks, can you explain or point to your preferred governmental structure? I enjoy hearing about Christian nationalism, but forgive me as I'm having trouble conceptualizing this fully. Thanks. I haven't reached any conclusions yet. I don't have a solution. I don't have an ideal yet. I would like to work one out. Someday, 15 years from now, when I've finished Arts of Dark and Light, maybe I can, tackle the Summa Economica or something. All I can say is that we have learned a lot in the last 250 years, and we should stop pretending that we haven't. I get very, very annoyed when I talk about direct democracy and I hear people produce arguments that the founding fathers used against it 250 years ago or thereabouts. It's ridiculous. We've learned a tremendous amount about representative democracy, even in its republic form, and it doesn't work very well. It was new and untried then, but it's been tried, and it has completely failed. If you look at what's happened to the United States, if you look at what has happened to Great Britain, all of these, limited democratic, representative democratic systems have completely failed to preserve the nation. I mean, this is one of the ironies about communism, is that communism has actually proven to be less destructive to a nation of people than neoliberalism. The United States is no longer America. The United Kingdom is increasingly not English. And yet, if you look at the countries that were occupied by communists, whether it was China, whether it's Vietnam, whether it's Russia, all of these nations are actually better off in terms of preserving their national structure and their base of people. They're all actually better off than any of the quote unquote free and open societies. And I'm not saying that does not mean, again, don't be a binary thinker. That does not mean that communism is good. It merely means it's not as completely nightmarish. And so I lean towards direct democracy because from what I've seen, direct democracy appears to work considerably better than representative democracy. It's much harder to corrupt. It's much harder to buy off. And so, perhaps some combination of a constitutional monarch with direct democracy might work a lot better than the parliamentary system. Can I show you the math? Which math do you mean? Are you talking about communism versus neoliberalism in terms of the population, or are you talking about direct democracy versus representative democracy? Andreas Persson says direct democracy in a multicultural society. Yeah, that's much better. Much, much better than a multicultural society with representative democracy. Do you think that the success of the West is proof that Christianity is true? No, I don't. Would you please explain what you mean to be the... I don't give a flying fuck about Hitler. No, I have no interest in talking about Hitler. All of you alt-retards who are, you know, running around going, Hitler did nothing wrong. I just never leave the channel and never come back. You're far too stupid for me to even bother to try to address you. Okay. Remember what I was saying about binary thinkers? Anyone who doesn't realize that Hitler was an absolute disaster as a leader of Germany is literally too stupid for this channel. You know, does it mean that he was the very worst human being in the history of the planet? No. You know, was he absolutely wrong about everything? No. But to go from to react to the ridiculous idea that one particular terrible leader who is responsible for all kinds of bloodshed was therefore good because he wasn't actually this character in cartoon that is presented to the uneducated is just ridiculous, you know? And so, you know, I see that this is where this is where it just gets ridiculous. And no, Derek, you're wrong. He says he was a better leader of Germany than Stalin was of Russia. That's totally false. Totally false. Hitler got Germany conquered. And it was totally it was totally unnecessary. You know, he was I mean, remember, I'm a war gamer. Do you know what Führerbefehl means? It means the leader's order. And Hitler made a regular habit of interfering with his brilliant generals and giving them orders that, you know, he would give them no retreat orders, so they would all get surrounded and killed and captured when they could have easily, you know, withdrawn in good order. I mean, that alone demonstrates, you know, how hopeless and hapless he was. Now, obviously, you know, failure always comes from the seeds of success. What people don't the one thing probably that nobody realizes about Hitler is that he was a huge gambler. Huge gambler. And when he ordered the Wehrmacht into Czechoslovakia and in Austria, especially with Czechoslovakia, the generals were terrified because they knew that if there was any resistance, they were going to lose badly. Yeah, they were sending out troops without, you know, in armored cars that were like didn't have any ammunition and stuff. If they'd actually run into resistance, they would have lost badly. But Hitler got away with bluffing early on, and so he learned to disrespect his generals because they were quite rationally telling him, "You can't do this. It's not going to work." Well, they were wrong. It did work. But it worked because he took insane gambles. And so, you know, I mean, for me, if you want to know the core of my opinion about Hitler. It was that he was a gambler who got away with some early high-risk gambles and never learned to stop pushing all his chips onto the table. And so it was, those who think that he was even a competent leader don't really know the history of that time very well. So anyhow, let's get to some of the super chats then. What should society treat gammas? Can they move up? Society should force them to tell the truth and should not put up with their nonsense. They can move up, but it's difficult. Duralex Sedlex says a slave by any other name is still a slave, even if you call them debtors. Slave owners also lobbied to make it illegal to free your slaves in bankruptcy and after inheritance too. I'm not surprised. I mean, if you look at the way it's reprehensible, the way that you cannot discharge student loan debt in bankruptcy. The mere fact that that law exists demonstrates that the United States is not a just society. Jack Cool asks, is Ferguson's history of money compromised and worthless? I haven't read it, so I don't know. I mean, it's probably a bit compromised, but that doesn't mean that it's worthless. Boingo Bear says, just a reminder to plug Crypto Fashion. Thanks, Vox. Yeah, if you're interested in various Castalia and Infogalactic and Alt Hero wear, check out crypto.fashion. We've got a bunch of t-shirts and stuff. I've actually got a couple on the way to me now. Faithful Bear throws in a buck. Thank you. As does Thinker Bear. And Thinker Bear says, hi, Vox. Just finished Throne of Bones. Loved it. What is the next book in the series? A Sea of Skulls. You can read the ebook, or you can wait until the extended edition comes out in paperback and hardback later this year. In the meantime, you might want to pick up Summa Helvetica and other stories, which are all set in the same world and even star some of the same characters. Let's see. Freethinker says, did you see Andrew Yang on Shapiro's show? Boy, Ben is really coming out these days. No longer a closet socialist, I guess. I pay no attention to Ben Shapiro at all. I'm going to review his book as promised, but no, I've literally never seen Shapiro's show. The only thing I've ever seen of it is that little clip of him calling me an outspoken white supremacist, which we still have to get around to dealing with. I've actually been busy all day. In fact, you can probably see I'm wearing the same shirt that I was wearing last night. I spent literally all day today working on our legal brief for the next stage in the Indiegogo arbitration. And I have to say that, you never know, but I think it's looking extremely good. I will be very surprised if they don't eventually find in our favor on pretty much everything. We've seen them take their best shot, and it's like having a puppy come up and then bump its head into your knee when it wants to get its ears rubbed. I mean, they have no case whatsoever. So it'll be interesting to see how it sorts out. Jack Cool says, I'm having trouble getting my TradCon Civnat dad to take the red pill. I've gotten him to watch the Darkstream, so there's progress. All right, well, Dad, hello, and take it slow. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to say is going to be stuff that will initially rub you the wrong way. That's okay, and that's a normal reaction. It's totally normal. But all I would ask is just think through. Try not to go with your emotional reaction. I understand all the emotional appeal of civic nationalism and that sort of thing. I used to be a civic nationalist myself, but over time, I was forced to confront the reality that there was no there. There is no proposition. There's no penalty to not subscribing to the proposition. There's no way to force people to assimilate to something that they don't know, have never known, don't understand, and ultimately don't care about. So I'm just saying, give it time. Bunny Galore says, I just bought Throne of Bones. I'm so excited. It comes in an audiobook. Yeah, Jeremy did a really good job. I think he did a really good job on that. I'm recovering from neurosurgery. Eesh. Hope you're all right. And can't read print, and it's perfect. Well, get better, and I hope that you make a full recovery. And hopefully we'll have another massive audiobook for you towards the end of the year. Ben Cohen says, is working to be self-employed advisable due to the increasing instability of full-time employment? Yes. I mean, I'm probably heavily biased that way. I've been completely self-employed since I was 23, 24 years old, probably 24. So I've, my experience in working, a regular job in a regular office is very limited. And even then, I was working for my dad's company. So, it wasn't really a normal experience in that regard. But what I like to encourage people to do, and this is just my philosophy, is that always try to have at least 2 streams of income. So even if you're working a regular job, do something else that earns a little bit of money on the side somehow. And ideally that has the possibility of really going somewhere. I mean, I had no idea, none, that what we're doing with unauthorized could be as successful as it already is. And it has so much more potential. It's just crazy. People were encouraging me, the Voxiversity Foundation guys were encouraging me to get into video. And here I was like, working on games, and we had Castalia House going, doing books and that sort of thing. And I thought going into comics was pretty out there, and so, to move into video like this, which is not my medium, not my natural medium, and actually find a surprising level of success has been really eye-opening. And it's really taught me that you can't make a plan. You can make whatever plans you want, but the most important thing is to be flexible. Stop doing what doesn't work and start doing more of what does work. And so, it's interesting too to see how, some people were saying, oh, thank you for showing up and streaming on Sunday night. But that's the way that I work. I mean, the way that I work is consistency. One of the reasons why the blog became so successful and got to the point where it regularly had 100,000 views a day, a little bit less now since I clamped down on the comments. But it's still getting 85,000 views a day or whatever. But the reason that it built up was because I learned that if I didn't have a post every single day, that the audience would not build regularly. And what I learned over time is that the ideal was to have 4 posts a day. I'm not always great about that. In fact, the last week or so, I've been a bit off. I've only had like 2 or 3 posts a day because I've been so busy working on both Milo's book, Alt Hero Q, which, by the way, we're going to get the digital version of Alt Hero Q #1 out very, very soon. I just finished the first round of corrections on the lettering, and so that's coming out very soon for those of you who are Alt Hero Q supporters. And then working on the legal brief. We've got this massive announcement coming in May. So those of you who happen to have $1,500, you might want to save it for May. But what we're, because of that, the lawyers are all busy, and so I had to do all the stuff myself, which is fine. They've honestly trained me well enough that it's not a problem. But it took like 2 or 3 days to complete the whole thing. So the key is to just keep the consistency. And so now, because there's 934 people watching now, this video will probably end up with 10,000 views in the next 24 to 36 hours. And so it's clearly a priority. It's become more of a priority as we've had more success on the video front. Now, of course, I'm not going to stop writing. Of course, I'm not going to stop doing the books. I mean, that's what I do. That's what I love to do. But it just means that I'll always make sure that we get the Darkstreams in, that we get the Voxversities done, all that sort of thing. What's the difference between high deltas and low deltas? Low deltas tend to have more gamma characteristics. High deltas tend to be more, they have more status. They tend to be a bit more attractive to women. They tend to probably be more noticed by the alphas and so forth. Lucius Quintus Cincinnati says, $1,500. Are you selling centuries-old Italian wine? No. But if you think about it, we do books, we do movies, we do videos, we do comics. You can probably figure out what comes next. So, let's see. Yeah, people have learned not to worry too much about on days when I don't post. I mean, I was actually asleep that entire day. That's my superpower is basically I recover really fast from things, and as long as I can sleep. And so when I get sick, I think it really annoys Space Bunny sometimes, but I just crash and sleep for 40 hours, and then I get up and I'm fine. And so I just figure why be awake for being feeling miserable and stuff. Lucius says, governments subsidize the construction and maintenance of things like high-speed rail. Is that something that is net positive? It can be, but it can also be a complete, debacle. So, I mean, it's just one of those things. Intrinsically bad. It has to be judged on a case-by-case basis. Caleb says, do you think Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson are the beast and Antichrist prophesied of in Revelations? No. I mean, just think of how disappointing that would be to every eschatologist throughout all of history. They'd be so disappointed. I mean, it doesn't even rise to the level of like Damien the Omen. Christopher Gee has two questions. What are your opinions on socialism's effects on the automobile industry? Well, they tend to be pretty terrible. I mean, if you look at the cars that socialist societies have produced, they've usually been pretty bad. Whereas the Japanese, the Koreans, they produce really good cars. Any favorite cars or automobile manufacturers? Absolutely. My dream car is a late 50s Triumph TR3A. I also, that's like my reasonable dream car. I love the Jaguar XKEs, of course. And I used to have an MGB, and I always like the MGAs better. So I tend to be a British car fan. Old classic British cars. Let's see. The Lada, yeah. Justin Biebeler says government is nothing more than the centralization of power. No, I don't think that's true. I mean, there's lots of different levels of government and that sort of thing. Certainly, I think that. I mean, if you think about it, local governments can be incredibly tyrannical. I mean, can you imagine if some of those homeowners associations were militarized? They'd be erecting death camps for people who didn't wash their cars in the driveway, or who did wash their cars in the driveway. I mean, people are people, and bad people will always do bad things to other people at every level. And so, I mean, government is what it is. It's always going to be there, and any fantasies that you might have about anarchy are just ridiculous, because all anarchy is open, endless war until some warlords manage to impose an amount of order. Vox, lots of people that think that Napoleon was a good general. He was an excellent general. There's no question. But Wellington was better. I mean, I've been reading the history of the Peninsular War, and it's actually interesting because you can see that Napoleon was a brilliant general, but he was fundamentally limited by his inability to come up with a succession plan, or to come up with, or to have relationships of sufficient trust with his underlings, with his marshals. And so it's been really interesting in that regard, because Napoleon completely set up his marshals to fail, and he set up his brother Joseph to fail in Spain. No question. Bear Koch says, what is your opinion on Calvinists? I think they're fundamentally wrong. I think that they, I mean, if you want to read my debate with Team Calvin, which is a group of, I think it was 3 Calvinist friends and readers of mine, you can see that I fundamentally, intrinsically disagree with their reasoning. And so, but, I respect some of them. I work, we've got a Calvinist or two, in the team, and that's fine, works great. But, we don't, it's not like we sit around arguing about theology often. Let's see. A lot of people insist the initial success of early native cultures was based on socialist practices. That's because they haven't read Christopher Hallpike. They don't know what they're talking about. Would I ever do a tour of my book collection? Possibly. Brandon Fiadino says, I used to be an ANCAP libertarian. What broke you out of that mindset, Vox? Immigration. And eventually the realization that free trade was intrinsically bad. Is it worth doing a math major? Depends what you want to do with it. I mean, if you just want to become a math professor, probably not. But if you want to use it to as a piece of paper proving that you're really, really smart, and then use it to jump into a high-paying career, that is a good idea. Opinion on legal immigration. Most of it should be stopped. Do you prefer ethno-state? I prefer nation states. So it depends on what you mean by ethnicity. Most people, when they talk about ethno-states, they actually are talking about pan-national race-based states. Remember, race is a superset of nation. That doesn't work. Every single pan-whatever, pan-Arabist, pan-European, pan-Asian, pan-African, every attempt to set up a government on that basis has failed. So I think that ethno-states are not possible. Nation states are. Do you think President Trump has a higher IQ than me? I wouldn't know. In fact, it's impossible to say because he does such a good job of speaking down to much lower levels that it's really hard to gauge what his actual level of intelligence is. Fuad Muhammad says capitalism isn't conservatism. That's absolutely true. As someone who has recently found Christ, do you have any advice in telling my family about this momentous change? I think that you ought to just let them discover it for themselves. It made a big impact on me when I noticed a friend had become a Christian and started going to church. I didn't realize it. I actually noticed it in his actions first. That's a much more compelling testimony than just making an announcement. Hey, guess what? I'm Justin, see, this is, again, you're operating at too low a level here, Justin. You should probably not comment for a while and listen more. So-called free trade is not free trade. It is completely controlled trade by world government organizations. Yes, that's true. But actual free trade is even worse. Actual free trade, the kind that they are working towards, is totally and utterly incompatible with maintaining a society or maintaining a nation. It's called labor mobility. Look into it. No, Lidsall is wrong. He says Trump is dumber than most conservatives think he is, but a lot smarter than most liberals want him to be. That's not true. He's very, very intelligent. I mean, he went to Wharton. You don't have the kind of success that he's had, and have a sub-Mensa IQ. Some Cyrillic letters that I can't pronounce said, with the social-sexual hierarchy, do Sigma males act as Sigmas in most or all scenarios? Or is it just as fractal as the other roles? I think that we tend to learn to take on those other roles in organizations to the extent that we ever participate in them at all. I am a solid delta on my soccer team. in terms of my pattern of behavior. You know, I'm not the alpha. I'm not one of the bravos. I'm a reliable guy who is competent and is happy to just show up and do my job. But that's one of the few areas in my life where I ever play that role. How much legal immigration would you let in? At this point in the United States, absolutely none. You know, they need serious repatriations. Shania Page says Vox Day definitely seems a lot calmer than I remember. No, I haven't changed at all. You know, I mean, I've probably learned to just not react to silly and stupid challenges. I've learned. I mean, because I see a lot more of it now. You know, when you're doing the video stuff, you're going to run into a lot of really unintelligent people. That's not as true in the blog environment, because there you've got people who tend to be more literate, and so you know, I had to learn to just let the stupidity wash over. You know, you know, what was that? You know, the litany against suffering that Paul Atreides used to recite. And when it is over, the stupidity will be gone, and only I will remain. I don't have any plans to have E. Michael Jones on. I haven't had anybody on, like, except for once, I think, with Owen. And I'm probably more likely just to do, you know, when Owen and I get together next, I'm probably more likely just to go onto his stream. If authorities are wholly on board, how many people is it realistically possible to deport each year? Well, if you think about it, they deported 1 million with Operation Wetback. So realistically, probably on the order of anywhere between, I would say probably around 5 million a year. Plus, you'd also see a lot of self repatriation. So you'd probably be able to see 10 million a year going home. Vox, what's your view on the current comic book industry? Oh, it's dying. I mean, it's really collapsing, and it's a great opportunity for us. Yes, Lin Yen Chen, it's a Dune reference. Oh my. Big Bear says he wants to do a buddy comedy with E. Michael Jones and Vox. That strikes me as an insanely bad idea. It just wouldn't be funny. Vox Day Respecter says, it's so refreshing to find another Sigma. Henry Teabag says, when you decided to leave the U.S., did you consider countries other than Italy? Yes, absolutely. We visited a number of places. Let's see here. I look like an evil Bond villain with that laugh. I always thought I would be a good Bond villain, to be honest. I'm a little bit disappointed that they've never come to me and asked me to do that. I think, but you know, it's nice. If I don't know if you've read the Alt Hero comics at all, but if you have, then you'll know that the Supreme Dark Lord does make an appearance in Alt Hero number 6, as does Space Bunny, for that matter. Let me check the super chats, make sure I didn't miss anything. No, we're good. We're good. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in tonight. I'm just trying to remember if there's anything I need to tell you about. No, I'm not a Jesuit. I'm not a Catholic either. Non-denominational Christian. So, let's see here. Okay. Milo's book is out. How to Be Poor. We're actually about to get the paperback out as well. But in the meantime, you can get the ebook at Archaven Comics. Amazon has been reviewing it for something like 8 days now. They had asked us for another 5 days to review it. So sometime this week, we should be getting a determination as to whether the book will be available as an ebook on Amazon or not. But regardless whether it is or not, you can find it on Archaven Comics. And actually, it's a better deal there because, number one, 30% of the money doesn't go to Amazon. And number two, you get both the EPUB and the Kindle version. You actually get both files, so I highly recommend, if you haven't checked out the Archaven store yet, we've got all kinds of digital comics, ebooks, and then there's links to the actual paperbacks and hardcovers that you can buy direct too. It's a much better way of supporting both Castalia House, Archaven Comics, and the authors because it's our direct store, and so that way the big guys don't take their very healthy cut. So if you haven't checked out archavencomics.com yet, I definitely encourage you to do that. And we'll have some other announcements coming soon this week. Yeah, Amazon is definitely dragging their feet. Is V queer? If you're asking whether I'm gay, no, I'm not. I'm straight, married, and been married for a long, long time. So anyhow, Sergeant Peterson, how can a rich dude write a book on being poor? By blowing through all his money. He directly addresses that, and he explains that. In fact, let me actually address that directly here. And of course, it's very classic Milo. So he says, I, Milo, the monominous superstar of iconoclast politics, am a very poor person. I don't mean what I would have called poor in 2017, like only reserving rooms for myself and my entourage instead of renting out the entire hotel floor. I don't even mean what you think poor means, like struggling to pay the gas bill each month, while the littlest of your 10 unfortunate brats can't shake that whooping cough and Nana's got tuberculosis again. And I certainly don't mean the special type of poor typical of young liberal voters, the ones who think an occasional shift at the vegan co-op is hard work and who are attempting to run up consumer debt equal to their $200,000 in school loans in pursuit of an advanced degree in menstrual blood painting. I'm talking about being a destitute, broke-ass son of a bitch. Most Americans will never experience, in fact, can hardly dream about, the level of poverty I've fallen into. This is the kind of poor that makes stockbrokers and CEOs take a plunge off a skyscraper, not because they've actually experienced it, but merely because they see it possibly coming. My creditors have sent me a series of increasingly hysterical overdue notices. They start with bolding and underlining, then proceed to official-looking stamps on threats of legal action, and have now progressed to dire threats written in blood with entreaties to Satan to strike me down if I don't pay up immediately. You know these companies, they always seem to be named after sweet pie-banking old biddies, like the Esther McGillicuddy Corporation of San Antonio, Texas, or Fannie Mae, and they'll occasionally send along surveillance footage of family members. My debts are so large they'd make a good number crunching exercise for an Indian waiting on an H-1B visa from Donald Trump so he can steal some poor American's job. Although my personal exposure to the disasters of the last few years is minimal, Milo Inc. is in red to the tune of, at last count, over $4 million. Still, it's not all bad news. Do you know how successful you have to be to end up owing $4 million? You go out and try to get $4 million in debt. Go on. Tell me how long it takes someone to lend you that much money. So, no, I mean, the thing is, you have to read that because he's not at all sorry for himself. You know, he understands exactly why he's there. I mean, you know, to me, it's remarkable that someone could have that much of a sense of humor over that cataclysmic a fall. So anyhow, check it out, archavencomics.com. And that's it for tonight. So thank you for tuning in. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.